I mean, they haven't been particularly adept, it has to be said, in the past, of moving at speed. They have preferred to wear down the Ukrainian defenders with countless meat assaults, but that may change if they were able to break through the lines. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. By the speed the Russian army is currently moving, someone has estimated they'll be in Kiev in 300 years' time. So it could be quite a while. Putin won't be around, which is nice to think about, but neither will we. So, one of the key reasons why they have generally not recruited in Moscow and St. Petersburg, where the majority of ethnic Russians are, and other ethnic Russian regions of Russia, they have gone for ethnic minorities. They've offered them a huge amount of money. I believe it's now about £30,000, which in Russia is huge. So, yes, you may die, you may get injured, but you also may not. It's less likely because of the meat assaults, but you may not. And at least if you listen to what they promise you, your family will be well looked after. Whether they are or not, you don't know because you're dead. But you take that risk, I guess. So it is something I don't think that it's going to affect Russian society in terms of the death toll for a while longer. The economy is finding it harder. That's indeed true. Sanctions are working, although they are slow, and there certainly are ways around them. And Russia has been learning from that, primarily from Iran, how to deal with sanctions. And obviously China and India play a role in supporting, and other post-Soviet countries as well. So the economy isn't something that is going to really lead to mass protests in Russia. And also, why would it? The regime is very securitized. You simply don't know whether your friends and your family are anti-war, and you have seen how violent the regime is. If you're in the opposition, if you're an oppositionist, you're more likely to look at Medusa and various other opposition-minded media, so you're likely to know what's happening in Ukraine and what the Russian army has been doing in Ukraine. You also know from the past what the Russian police do to protesters. So why are you going to go out and protest by yourself? It takes an awfully brave person to want to go out onto the streets, especially in January in Russia, knowing you're likely to get your head kicked in and you're probably going to be alone. I mean, I wouldn't do it. So we can't expect Russians, knowing what their government has done, to want to go out unless we're going to arm them, which leads to a huge issue. So it is a very weird situation at the moment, but what we would expect to happen in the West probably isn't something that will happen in Russia. So mass deaths and economic crisis in the West would probably lead to mass protests. That isn't necessarily the case in Russia. To an extent, I agree, the regime was right. Russians know how to suffer, and that will continue for a while.
And with that in mind, then, do you think Putin would be happy or willing to go to the negotiation table, with what Russia holds today in Ukraine? Or is he still holding out for that wider capturing the whole of the Donbass objective? Or do you think somewhere in his mind, perhaps there is still this idea that he could reach these maximum objectives, overthrowing the Ukrainian government and effectively taking control of Ukraine?
Well, I think that Putin believes he's winning this war. Now, he's quite close in terms of taking the whole of Donbass. I think there's about 3% left for Donetsk, and he's very close to Luhansk as well. They are, if they take Pokrovsk, they can get through to Dnipropetrovsk, the oblast of Dnipropetrovsk, and onto the city of Dnipro. And if they can get across into Dnipro and the bridges haven't been blown, they can get across the Dnipro River, and who knows where they can go from there. There are fewer fortifications. As far as I know, I'm not a military expert, but from my understanding, there are fewer fortifications that have been built by the Ukrainians. The territory is far more open. So if the Russians are able to break through, who knows? I mean, they haven't been particularly adept, it has to be said, in the past, of moving at speed. They have preferred to wear down the Ukrainian defenders with countless meat assaults. But that may change if they were able to break through the lines. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. By the speed the Russian army is currently moving, someone has estimated they'll be in Kiev in 300 years' time. So it could be quite a while. Putin won't be around, which is nice to think about, but neither will we. So, it is, it's certainly, I would say, a possible scenario. But I think Putin believes he's winning. And if there are going to be negotiations, it's going to be negotiations which don't mean anything, that will be ignored by Russia. You go back to what happened with Minsk. I mean, the Russians always complain that Angela Merkel was, the reason why Minsk didn't work out. And she has been quite very clear about it. And so was Francois Hollande, that Minsk was a way to give Ukraine the support necessary for what was coming again. At the same time, the Russians, the president, deputy in the presidential administration, Vladislav Surkov, an interesting gentleman who is curator put in charge of looking after Ukraine, also said that we knew Minsk was not going to work. We made sure Minsk was not going to work. So it's very much the case that if there are negotiations, the Russians will find ways around it. As former Ukrainian President Leonid Kuchma said, you spend days and days and days negotiating with the Russians. You finally get them to agree to something. You wake up the next morning and you find out they've done something completely different. So that's where we are, I think. If Putin wants negotiations, they will be as a way to rearm his army, re-equip, retrain, maybe in 5 years' time, try again, but they will definitely not be for peace.
And just finally, Dr. Hall, as I haven't got you for much longer, in an article for France 24 earlier this month, you discussed the FSB pretty much fabricating enemies for Russia, in this case from the Belgorod People's Republic, which is, for all effects, a meme. Has the FSB become more empowered by the war in Ukraine, or is this it trying to find reason to keep existing?
Well, I would say the FSB is fairly powerful anyway, and has been for a while. It's the main security service, and whether it's more empowered now, I don't know. I think that it's been empowered for quite a while in regards to this. It is ultimately you come up with the scariest scare when you go to the Tsar, and therefore you get the resources, you increase your power, you highlight that you're actually paying attention, these sorts of things. So certainly I think the FSB will keep on inventing new groups, and this is a way to highlight to Putin that they're actually doing something about it, in the same way that we've seen the SVR, the Foreign Intelligence Service, also in the GRU, the Military Intelligence Service, engaging in hybrid war tactics in Europe. The attempt to assassinate the head of Rheinmetall, the planes that apparently went down in Lithuania, the alleged potential bombs that were found in places like Birmingham and I think Riga as well. This will continue for a while because this is how Russia uses these methods to destabilize Europe. It probably can't, especially as it's fighting in Ukraine, compete with the West. But it can try to destabilize the West by using hybrid warfare, for use of a better term, that isn't obviously the same as hard power, but is certainly difficult for Western states to cope with. But domestically, the FSB will keep on finding enemies because that ultimately is their role.
You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio with me, Louis Sykes. If you'd like to be the first to get exclusive content, you can sign up for membership with the link below. You can also listen to Times Radio for the latest news and analysis, or read it on thetimes.com. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.